working through some refreshers from the May workshop. And lastly, he's going to be hearing from RSM on the components of the application development process through CAMS and the technical narrative requirements of that. Desi, thank you for starting the recording. I did say that 5 minutes ago, but I was on mute when I first asked you to do that. So thank you for reading my mind and getting that done. With that, Brandon, and I'm putting you on the spot with about 30 seconds of lead time here, but I'd ask you to go ahead and pull up your section of the presentation and get us going. And for the folks online, I know we didn't hear this previously, but Stellonic, new name, familiar faces. These are the same folks that have helped us with broadband data collection efforts at the Virginia Tech Center for Geospatial Technology. Should be a familiar face, and look forward to hearing from them debuting what this zip code application portal is going to look and feel like and the requirements of it.
Hey, thanks, Chandler. Just confirming that you can see my screen okay?
Yeah, we're all set.
It should say BEAD application dashboard up.
Yep, that's right.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Brandon Herndon, and on behalf of the DHCD and the Office of Broadband, I'm here to give you a walkthrough of the portal we developed for the BEAD applications. It's an interface designed to facilitate the application submission for the subgrantee selection process for the BEAD program. The public-facing page will be available at a link I'll put in the chat later. It's currently not live now. We're still waiting on the finalized list of eligible locations from NTIA to be published before we release it. You won't be able to submit applications through the public link. An invitation email will be sent to eligible applicants with a unique link to access your specific application portal for you. And through the link provided, applicants will be able to submit applications using the dashboard for zip code tabulation areas, ZICTAs, only within the counties and cities listed in your submitted letter of intent. Specific provider access to the BEAD application portal dashboard is controlled via unique URL that will be included in the invitation email, and this should not be shared outside of your organization. And if you think it's compromised or if a new unique URL is needed for your organization, just let us know. We can generate a new one. For detailed information regarding the application process and requirements, please refer to the documentation provided by DHCD's Office of Broadband for their application guidance version 2, and that'll be linked as well. So on the public-facing page, as well as the dashboard, all of these documents and resources that I just discussed will be down here for people to access for reference later. As defined in the application guidance, supporting documentation must be submitted through DHCD's Centralized Application Management System, also known as CAMS. Applications must be created at the ZICTA level, and there are 3 options on how to submit an application for a ZICTA: a single, a bundled, or a reserve application. A single application consists of 1 ZICTA, and all must contain at least 95% of the BEAD eligible locations identified within the ZICTA to be served. A bundled application consists of multiple ZICTAs, each with at least 95% of the eligible locations. And then also a reserve application can be submitted for a single ZICTA, only to be evaluated if the bundled application is not awarded. And as you know, a bundled application is an all or none. A reserve application cannot be created in the system in the dashboard unless there's already an existing application for that ZICTA. And then we have application guidance down here that you can refer to later. And also, we're always available for questions as well. So I'm going to do a little walkthrough here on what it would look like. So when you get your unique link, this is what you'll see. And this list here, this is just dummy data that we generated for this presentation. But this will be a list of jurisdictions that are located or that you indicated in your letter of intent. And then there's you can see submitted applications, whether you have single ones, bundled, or reserve. So currently there are no applications submitted for this within this dashboard for this fake provider we created. So first, we'll go to Culpeper County because that was, in this example was one of the ones that was indicated in the letter of intent. So the first thing you'll do is you'll indicate that the following required CAMS documents were submitted. So it's just check boxes confirming that. And then down here in the bottom, you'll see all the ZICTAs available for Culpeper County. And you notice how they're all grayed out. If you select a single application, you can see they're all available. If you select a bundled application, they're all available. You can see now the reserve application is not yet able to be selected, and this is because currently no bundled applications exist. So we're going to go through each one and see how it works. It's fairly simple. So single application, classification priority or non-priority. So we'll say it's a priority one. And then we'll do 20106. And the way that it's scored, it has to be by ZICTA. So unfortunately, you have to create an application for each ZICTA within each jurisdiction. So I'm just going to type in some quick information here. Total project cost, provider funds, cost for service, timeline for completions. These are all just number values. It doesn't accept text. And then maximum download speed, and then if it's low latency or not. Now on the bottom here is a copy and paste of fabric points. So there will be a list of BEAD eligible location IDs, and this is just copy and pasting the list of location IDs that you say you're going to serve with this within this specific ZICTA within this jurisdiction. So for 20106, we'll just copy and paste, and it can be simple as just highlighting a column or a row of data and then just copy and pasting it in. I will put in one incorrect one just so you can see what happens there. So we'll go submit, and then it said invalid fabric points found. You click on details, and it'll tell you which ones are invalid. So for example, this 456 is not included in a location ID within this specific ZICTA within this jurisdiction.
Hey, Brandon.
So yes.
If I could just kind of elaborate a bit on this point as well.
Mm-hmm.
Our BEAD process is going to be based on Fabric version 3.2. You all are reporting your data now on Fabric version 5. There's a bit of a lag there. We acknowledge that, but you will be using Fabric version 3.2. The way to kind of reduce the confusion there would be just to run with the ID numbers based on the points that we're going to post publicly in the open data portal once we get those approved by NTIA, right? Then just kind of treat those with their own unique IDs. That's what the portal is trained to recognize, is the Fabric IDs based on version 3.2. As long as you're using the list of locations that we publish on the open data portal and the location IDs associated with that, you can't mess up. And the portal will tell you if you do.
Thanks, Chandler. Correct. Yeah, and that's based on the last year's challenge process was based on Fabric 3.2, and that's why, and the result of the Fabric process is the list of these eligible IDs, and that's why we're still at 3.2 for this process. So now we're at a single applicant. Go ahead.
And yeah, I was just going to see if we could pause here for a second for a couple of quick questions in the room.
Okay.
Who you are, where you from?
Rob Taylor with River Street. Just a couple things to clarify. When you said Culpeper, do you have to fill out every ZICTA, even if you're not applying to each ZICTA, or just the ones you want to apply for?
I believe just the ones you want to apply for.
All right, so you don't have to do every single one. And the other question is, what if you don't receive a letter of support from that county? Are you still able to submit an application through the ZICTA portal or not?
Chandler should be able to answer this. My impression is that yes, you can, and that when we go to scoring, DHCD will verify that you have indeed received a letter of support from that jurisdiction. But Chandler can correct me if I'm wrong.
What Brandon just said is correct. Brandon, can you scroll down to those numerical inputs there that you input for that particular ZICTA? And when we say ZICTA, we mean zip code tabulation area. That's the fun government acronym for zip code tabulation area. What we will do when we receive your application in CAMS, you will upload all of the letters of support that you've received from cities and counties. We're going to go in as DHCD and build a list of every city and county you've gotten a letter of support from, and we'll send that to Stellonic for them to factor into the scoring. So you won't respond back in this in those text fields with a yes or no if you receive the letter of support. We'll do that for you based on the letters of support you uploaded to us in CAMS.
Yeah, but if you go to the very top, there's boxes you have to check first.
Wait, hang on. Ask it over again.
So if I don't have a letter of support, I can not check that box and still do an application?
Currently, it's a required field, so no, you can't. But we can make it a not required field if Chandler wants us to. It's not a big deal.
No, it's a great question. I think that's a really good point, Rob. And because we haven't released this yet, we can certainly add clarifying language there that, you know, letter of support, comma, if you have received it from the locality. Brandon, we got another question in the room. Just got to walk the microphone over. So pause for a second.
This is Robert Bridgham from Eastern Shore Broadband Authority. My two questions, one of them is there a way to programmatically load this data instead of it being loaded by hand per ZICTA? Because that's a lot of data to load. And I'll ask that one first. I don't know if that's I'm jumping ahead or not there.
Unfortunately, no. The way the scoring is and the way that we're doing things, it has to be copy paste. There was no. We went back and forth a lot on this actually, because we do realize there's like almost 1,300 ZICTAs within the state. But the answer is no.
Okay, and the second question, if you could scroll back up to the top of the page, one of the other checkboxes is derivation of costs. We have to load a derivation of cost per ZICTA if we're doing individuals. So would we be loading in CAMs? Let's say we had 200 ZICTAs, we'd be loading 200 derivation of costs because it's per.
I'm unsure what DHCD requires for that. And my thought it could be probably some sort of spreadsheet that has them all in one. But I could let Chandler talk to that.
Yeah, I would, Robert, I would certainly expect that's something we'll build out guidance around is the level of detail and the amount of detail that we'll need to submit for derivation of costs, and whether or not, if you're going to do an entire county in a bundle, could that bundle derivation of cost then suffice for the single derivation of costs? Send us that question to broadband@dhcd.virginia.gov, and we can put that in an FAQ and be consistent for everybody.
Thank you.
Questions online? And Brandon, before we go any further,
Chandler.
Okay, yeah, yep, go ahead. Tell us who you are, where you're from.
Yeah, Tom Ennis with All Points Broadband. Where would we upload the deobligation of locations that are not a BSL or have service? How do we include those in this ZCTA application?
Great question. We'll need you to upload that bulk file with all of the points you're seeking to deobligate in the places you're applying in CAMs. We could not build in and factor that into this portal because we have to run with the approved BEAD challenge list points. We can't change the outcome of the BEAD challenge process. This portal has to run on a defined denominator of locations in each zip code, so we can calculate the 95% minimum application requirement for those locations. So you'll submit that separately in CAMs, and in the zip codes that you're selected as the provisionally awarded subawardee, we'll go in and look at your response for the deobligation of locations that you submitted in CAMs.
So the upload in CAMs maybe would be an optional attachment, and then you would change the denominator of locations based on approved BSLs that were removed from the ZCTA?
No, so the way we would handle that is, and this is across all applicants will need to design a network, propose to serve a zip code based on the locations that are approved as a result of our BEAD challenge process. After the fact, if you're selected as the awardee in that zip code, then we'll consider deobligating you from some of those locations. But for the purpose of the application process, out of fairness to all applicants, we have to design networks to propose to serve at a minimum 95% of the eligible locations in each zip code. And then after you're selected as the provisional subawardee, that's when we'll go in, review what you've proposed to deobligate as a fake location. And if we agree, take those off the map from your obligation to serve under your awarded zip codes.
Hey, Chandler, it's Jen Halazinski from Comcast. I have a clarifying question on that. So are you saying that, for instance, we apply for a ZCTA and that has 500 BSLs, right? Noting that this is on Fabric version 3.2. we know significant changes has probably have happened since we're on version 5. And we believe, you know, 100 of those are BSL false. We're still to build in cost for those BSLs because, again, and that could significantly affect a bid that we put in, right? If we know that those are BSL falses, right? I know that you have to concur and you have to review and agree with us. But I'm concerned about the cost in putting that in a bid if we know and we have proof that those are BSL false.
Jennifer, it's a great question, and I certainly understand the sentiment behind it and the illogical kind of making the application process fit into the guidance from NTIA here. What we're going to have to do in that situation is it'll depend on the applicant that's proposing to serve that area, right? If you are the incumbent, you do not need to build in the cost to serve locations that you believe are already served by your network, right? So when you're coming in, you would propose to you identify those locations that you already serve as the incumbent, those 100 locations in this theoretical example, and then factor in the remaining cost to serve the remaining locations, right? Pending approval of that deobligation. So it's gonna be a lot of contingency based on the situation here. If you're the incumbent, the applicant, and you already serve some of those locations, or if you're identifying rocks or hay bales. But please do submit that question to the broadband email inbox so we can give consistent guidance there as well.
Thank you.
And Jennifer, just to elaborate a little bit further as well, this is the opportunity to deobligate locations from your award is not just available to the incumbent in areas where service already exists. If we have, let's just say if ISPA submits a proposal in a zip code, there's 100 locations in the zip code. ISPA has built out 20 of those since version 3.2 of the fabric, right? They could propose to deobligate those 20 locations from their BEAD obligation, right? And factor that into their proposal to us. So that's ISPA. But if ISPB comes in and submits a proposal in ISPA's territory, ISPB is welcome to also identify where the 20 locations are that ISPA serves. So it's an even playing field here, right? As long as you're studying the data that's been published by the National Broadband Map for version 5, it's not just an opportunity that's available to the incumbent. It's an opportunity that's available to all the applicants, provided you identify where those 20 locations are that have already been served by ISPA since our challenge process results.
Great. Thanks for the clarification.
Definitely. Last call for questions online before we get into the next part of this. And Brandon, am I correct that if an applicant was on this page here and selected Culpeper County, if they selected multiple zip codes here, there would be multiple drop-down boxes for folks to go in and plug in that data. It's not like we have to toggle to separate pages here. If they selected one, it would just pop up below this blue box that's on the screen now. Is that right?
Yeah, we'll get there when we get to a bundled application example.
Sweet, thank you.
Chandler, can I ask what, this is Tom again from All Points Broadband. Can I ask one more follow-up question?
Yeah, go for it.
If we plan to deobligate a location in the ZCTA, do we still need a professional engineer to certify that we can go and serve a hay bale in the middle of a field? Or
That's
would
an
the
unforeseen
professional
question.
engineer-
Please go ahead and put that in writing to the
Okay.
broadband email inbox. We're getting into the third
Sure.
third phase of logic here. No, but it's a great question. Yeah, just put it in writing, please, so we can just give everybody the same answer, because I can't riff on that question currently. Okay, Brandon, I think we're good to go.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so this is a single completed single application for this specific ZICTA within within Culpeper County. So we'll go ahead and submit, and it says your BEAD application has been received. Return to dashboard. So now within the single ZICTA tab, you will see the submitted application that we have. Please note that you cannot edit a submitted application when it's submitted. Once that it's submitted, you can only delete it or create a new one. So before you hit that submit button, make sure all your information is correct. You can view it of the information located in it. as well as the points that you have. And then the submission info, and here it is not a reserve application, it's not a bundled application, indicating that it's a single application. So the next example I'd like to go through is a bundled application. So we'll go back to Culpeper and click the mandatory fields. Here you're seeing reserve is still not highlighted. That's because we do not have a bundled application submitted yet. So click bundled, priority, and here you'll see now that 20106 is not available to be selected because there is a single application for that. So for the bundled application, we'll do 2 as an example, say 20186 and maybe 22701. And when you click these, you'll see that it opens up an additional window chandler like you were asking before. And then fill out this information. And then for fabric points, one here. Two 22701. All right, and then we will submit. Oh, error, I missed something. Invalid fabric points for 20186. Oh, here we go. It works. Okay. Live demo. All right. Okay, so it's been received. Return to dashboard, and now it shows your single ones. It shows your bundle ones. So for your bundle, it'll show up first by jurisdiction in case you're submitting bundles for multiple jurisdictions, and then it will show each ZICTA application within that bundle. And here, if you view one, it'll have a link to other applications in that bundle, so you can flip quickly back and forth between them, as well as application IDs. These are important for troubleshooting. And then here it's signifying that, yes, this is part of a bundled application. So returning to the dashboard, we'll go back to Culpeper, and this time we'll submit a reserve application for one of the ZICTAs. See, reserve application is now available to be selected for one of the ZICTAs within the bundle we created.
Hey, Brandon.
So yep.
If I could just kind of hammer a point home here, for the entire application development process, since we had that workshop back in May, we've been telling you, and it's still true, that there's 2 ways to submit an application under BEAD. You can submit a bundled proposal with multiple zip codes, or you can submit a single zip code proposal, right? This is still the same requirement here, but just in portal design, what we had to do when building this thing is, if you're going to submit a single proposal and no bundled proposal, then you just go straight to the single application. But if you're going to submit a bundled proposal with a reserve application, then you have to come in through this structure, submit your bundled proposal first, and then submit your reserve applications. In this case, your reserve application functions as your single zip code application in this portal. Does that make sense? Great. Brandon, I'm getting some head nods in the room, so this is good. Keep going, please.
All right, head nods are good. Okay, so for reserve application is basically a single application that is used for scoring if your bundled application is not selected. So when we click reserve, only the ZICTAs that were indicated in the bundled application are able to be selected. So in this case, we'll just click on one of those and do more quick data entry just to fill out the required fields. And then hit submit. All right, it's been received, so this is good. So if you go to dashboard, we should have entries in all of these. So you have a single ZICTA, a bundle, and a reserve. And if you view the reserve one, it'll say reserve application yes, and then it has the ZICTA and the jurisdiction at top of what the reserve application is for. Another feature we have is that if you submit a bundle application, you can add ZICTAs to an existing one instead of having to redo the entire bundle. So we'll go back to Culpeper, and what we'll do here is we'll go back to a bundled application now. And here it says this already exists. Here's the ID for it. And it says you may only append ZICTAs to this bundle. So now it's not letting us select the single application one or the two that are already included in this bundle. So now we'll go ahead and add one additional ZICTA to the already existing bundle. I'm just copying and pasting, a row of comma separated location IDs. This works as well if you have an entire row in like a Excel spreadsheet. You can just select the row and copy and paste it here. So application has been received. And now if you go to the bundle, you can see that the same bundle exists, but now it has 3 ZICTAs located within that bundle. And that's pretty much it for the example on how to enter the information. Applications, they're not going to be scored when you submit. So if you want to go back later and change something or delete and update data, that's fine. We are not going to start scoring until the portal closes at 11:59 p.m. on March 1st, 2025. Chandler, I believe that's the correct date. So right. You'll be able to delete, modify, submit, resubmit, for all your jurisdictions up until that time. At 11:59 p.m. on March 1st, this application portal will close, and at that point, scoring will begin, and then DHCD will reach out and contact the winners of each individual ZICTA. So that's it. Looking at the unserved locations, I think the maximum fabric points in a ZICTA is like 3,400 of unserved locations. That being said, on average, there's only 135, and the median value is only about 40. So, there are a few ZICTAs that are pretty large, have a lot of fabric points, but most of them, the median's only 41, and that's the value that occurs the most in the data. And only 19 of them are over 1,000 points.
Can you repeat those numbers, Brandon? I think we had some folks writing those down just for informational purposes.
Yeah, sure. So currently this is not approved by NTIA yet, but currently in our preliminary data we have, the maximum value for a ZICTA is about 3,400 unserved points. Only 19 ZICTAs are over the 1,000th point for the amount of location IDs in a ZICTA, only 19 of them. The median value is 41. So most ZICTAs are about 40. And then the average, if you sum them all and divide by the total, is 135. So now I'm open for questions now, either from Chandler or clarifications or from the participants.
Yeah, we've got a question online, Angela. I'm going to come to you in a second. I guess one clarifying question from in the room. When we go to enter location IDs in one of the applications, is the portal screening for applicants whether or not that's 95% of the location IDs, or is that on the applicant to verify on their own?
That is on the applicant for 95%. Because when we were developing, it was still unknown whether we were going to remove, these hay bales or not. So we just we're taking everything we can, and then we'll let the scoring, after we close, any determinations made on that later. So it's on the applicant to figure out if they hit that 95% or not.
That's right, and that's 95% requirement has been publicly posted since our volume 2 originally came out. I just want to really put a fine point on this, and it relates to the deobligation of locations conversation we had yesterday about hay bales and rocks. You must propose to serve 95% of the locations in a zip code, irrespective whether it's a location or whether it's a rock or a hay bale at this point in the process. When we factor in whether or not a location is a hay bale or a rock or already served, that comes after the application window. So at this phase in the process, we have to have at least 95% of the locations in each zip code proposed to be served for us to even consider and pick up your application.
Yeah, and Chandler, I want to reiterate too that for bundled applications, they're evaluated by ZICTA. So, it must be 95% per ZICTA. You can't have 95% across the entire bundle and maybe like 50% in one and 100% in another ZICTA. It has to be 95% per ZICTA.
Great point. Got a question. Let's go to online first. Angela, you've been waiting for a while, and then we'll go back to in the room for a question.
She needs to be unmuted. It's saying she can't unmute for some reason.
Interesting. Desi, are you still online? And could you look into that, perhaps? We'll go ahead and start with the question in the room and see if we can make that work on the. And Angela, perhaps put the question in writing in the chat if all else fails.
Okay, I can see it, Angela. So it says, yes, you're putting in the pricing for both the bundle and the reserve. Is it expected that the prices would be different for a ZICTA and a bundle or reserve? And my thought is, yes, it probably would be, because if you're bundling stuff, you can probably do it cheaper. So the reserve application might actually be a little more expensive. Or it could be the opposite too, if it's in an area that you might have infrastructure near already. So yes, you can put in the same price, but they can be different as well. That's up to the provider to decide.
Let's go to the question in the room. Tell us who you are, where you're from.
Hey, Brandon, I'm Tyler Biku from Broadband Telecom Services. I guess this is an extension of the first question. But in the portal, is there a built-in check to ensure that location IDs are associated with the correct ZICTA?
Yes. Yep. In my first example, I think I typed in just a few spurious numbers and it wouldn't let me submit. And it highlighted which ones were incorrect. I can go back and do that again if you'd like.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, they'll be linked with the final NTIA approved list of eligible location IDs for each individual ZICTA.
Got another question in the room, Brandon. Hang on.
Rob Taylor with River Street. If you submit the location IDs in your bundle, do you have to then submit them again when you do the reserve, or are they automatically populated over?
Yeah, we talked about that internally, and the answer is yes, you do have to resubmit them again because the reserve could be different from the bundle. Your reserve, build out, could look a lot different if you're only serving that one versus if you're serving your entire bundle.
Last call for questions in person, online. If you're online, feel free to come off mute and ask the question. Okay, well, we got one more. We got one more. Okay, Brandon, disregard that. I think we're good in person. Thanks for joining. Thanks for walking us through this. And if folks have questions about the Stellonic portal for zip code areas, send them to the same broadband email inbox. We'll then redirect them to Stellonic so they can come back to us and then back out to you guys. So please do use that portal. I think we got one more comment in person, and then we'll decide whether we're at time for a break or time for some additional commentary. Oh, definitely. Yep. Oh, yeah. It'll all be added into the FAQ as well as we get more questions into the broadband email inbox. Okay. Well, thanks again, Brandon. And if you can stop screen sharing, I'll pull our timeline slide back up to see where we stand on timing.
All right, thanks, Chandler. Have a great day.
Okay, we are at 9:40 currently, slated for a 15-minute break after this timeline. How about we reconvene in here at 10 o'clock? That's a 20-minute break. I'm going to have a quick few things that are refreshers from the May workshop that are just, I think, points to hit for folks to be aware of as they start developing applications. And then we're going to hear from RSM. So during this 20-minute break, feel free to talk amongst yourselves, ask questions you may have about this portal. If you have a question, somebody else probably has the question too. And when we come back, if there are more questions about the portal, we can certainly tackle them or take record of them to get the answers back in writing. So see you all in 20 minutes.
How you doing? All right.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. It is 10 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started again. Please find your seats. So before we turn it over to the RSM folks again to go through the technical requirements, we wanted to hit some of the things that we covered back in May and a couple of things that have been newly released since May when we had that application development workshop back then. I've got just 6 quick things to run through. The first of which is the low-cost service option requirement under the BEAD program. And where I'm at, just to show folks that are following along, I went to our website and I've clicked on the application guidance document for broadband providers. Looking at that document, skip down to the low cost option section. So as you all know, we were in conversation with NTIA for a while about how to navigate this requirement. And what we landed on was that applicants under the BEAD program must commit to offering a low-cost service option requirement between $30 and $75 in the BEAD application process. You all will have to tell us what that number is for your commitment in the CAMS portal. You can offer a lower cost per month than $30 an option. That's certainly an option, but you have to identify to us in your application process at the price point at which your low-cost service option will be offered. There are a few key provisions in this section that you must also abide by. So I would encourage you to go here, read through this information. There are some allowable provisions in terms of increase of that established low-cost service option over the period of performance in the BEAD performance period, which is 10 years, and you can adjust that committed price up each year by the consumer price index, meaning the rate of inflation, but no more than 4% annually if the rate of inflation exceeds 4% in 1 year. Just wanted to touch on that briefly. This is something that you'll have to answer in the CAMS portal when you complete your application there. Questions on low-cost service option? Yes, and if I could tag in a mic runner from DHCD, please.
Rob Taylor with River Street. So one of the things you didn't cover was that the requirement of it having to be, how do you prove the person can get the service? And of course, we were using the lists that were supplied previously by the federal government. Have you guys come up with a alternative to that yet?
Yeah, great question. The question is essentially asking, the low-cost service option is there for folks that qualify for the Affordable Connectivity Program. And in the absence of the Affordable Connectivity Program, how do we verify eligibility for the low-cost service option? At this time, we don't have an answer for that. I would ask you to submit that in writing. We can give consistent guidance to everyone there about how we verify eligibility for ACP being no longer there, meaning how do we verify eligibility for this low-cost service option? But you're right, this has a eligibility caveat to it, and the low-cost service option only must be offered to households that would qualify for the Affordable Connectivity Program. We're still working with NTIA about how do we prove eligibility and therefore who applicants and awardees under BEAD are required to offer that low-cost service option to. Next one I want to touch on is the middle class affordability provision of the BEAD program. Middle class affordability was a broadly presented topic to states by NTIA. The way we've put that into practice is around the area of line extensions. As you all know, line extensions are something that we've been putting extra focus on and emphasis on through the VADI program in the last few years. We have a whole separate program called LECAP to tackle the cost of line extensions for low to moderate income residents. We want to make sure that we're not building networks out under BEAD that are still going to be unaffordable and out of reach for folks because of line extension costs. So what a requirement is for the BEAD program is that when you're submitting an application to us, an applicant should budget in a kind of a as needed pull down in their budget to tackle the line extension costs for folks that sign up for service within 1 year of service being made available. So just want to caveat that there, pointed out that you should be based on your estimated take rate, based on how many folks you think are going to sign up for service, how many line extension needs there are in the application area that you're proposing to serve under the BEAD program. Build in a budget to your funding request or your match funding, whatever it may be, to make sure that you're accounting for folks that if they do sign up for service within the first year that service is available, they're provided a free line extension and not charged whatever rate per foot your internal policy calls for. Got a question down here.
This is Robert Bridgham from the Broadband Authority. So if a person is not an eligible location, but they're in the BEAD area because they're marked as served, but they have a long extension, could that money be used for that person, or is it only for the eligible addresses?
The BEAD application process is only for those BEAD eligible addresses. Yeah, if there's a location that's mismarked as served, but they need a line extension to actually receive service, unfortunately, we can't use BEAD funds to get there. Another question down here. Kendrick, I'm sorry.
So that brings up something that I was kind of wondering, if something is mismarked, not even because it needs an extension, but it's simply mismarked. So like we're talking about all these de-eligible locations, but like what about these places that are just mismarked? How do we make sure that they're included?
Tell me who you are, where you're from, and give me an example.
I'm sorry,
please.
Amber. I'm with IWISP. So for example, ISP A applies for an area and there is a street that says it's served by ISP B, but come to find out that there is nothing there. There's no evidence of anything there. There's no pedestals. There's no boxes. Nobody on that street has their service. You call, they don't actually provide there. But according to reports, it does show that they are. How do we make sure that those people are being served and that there's money to help extend the line there?
Great question. And ideally, we would have identified those locations that may be misclassified as served through the BEAD challenge process. That's what we're working through approval on now. If there are additional things that slip through the cracks that folks were identified as served, or perhaps a home wasn't built but in time to be put on the map for the BEAD program, those are things we're looking at in VOTI 2025 and 2026. Of course, General Assembly has invested $10 million in the program for both fiscal years 25 and 26. So if there are errors, and we expect there to be some, right? We don't expect this to be completely stamped as universal coverage. It's going to be universal coverage at the moment of the map being certified, but there's going to be homes that are built. There's going to be potentially mapping errors, and that's things we'll look forward to tackling in VOTI 25 and 26. Okay, let's go to the next one. Scoring criteria. Bear with me as I scroll to that portion of the document. We talked about this back in May, but just want to briefly highlight again what we're looking for. The scoring criteria and the things you'll be evaluated on are the things that primarily you're submitting in that zip code portal that we talked about previously. Here's what those break down as. Not going to read through them. The things that we want to communicate in particular are the last two criteria there, the universality of your application and the local letter of support that you received are going to be huge determinants in selecting the awardees under the BEAD program. We've run the numbers every which way, put together a bunch of different scenarios. Those scenarios were outlined back at the workshop in May, but primarily the make it or break it is going to be whether or not you've received a letter of support from that county or city that you're submitting an application in, or whether or not you're proposing to serve 95% of the locations in a zip code, or if you've ticked that up to 96 or 97 or 98, 99 or 100. There's additional points available the closer you get to 100% of the locations in a zip code. So be putting extra emphasis on that when you're considering, how competitive your application might be when you submit it under BEAD. We're not saying that you shouldn't submit an application if you don't receive a letter of support from a city or county. We believe it's probably still worth your time to go ahead and put that application in. And if you're more competitive in the other scoring criteria, we're still going to award that application, right? But just be extra sure to pay attention to those last two scoring criteria of how close to 100% of a proposal are you proposing, and whether or not you received a letter of support from a local government or tribal government. Next up, want to clarify briefly how we're considering fiber versus non-fiber proposals. We have a flow chart about this back in May to kind of clear up how we're considering fiber versus non-fiber. What we'll do in practice in March, when we're evaluating that initial round of proposals submitted for the up to 90 or the at least 95% of locations in each zip code, how we'll handle that is we will look at the fiber proposals we've received first. If we've received a fiber proposal in that zip code and it's under the extremely high cost threshold that we would then set at that time, and it passes all the review criteria of the narrative requirements, that would be more than likely the provisionally selected subawardee in that zip code for that fiber proposal. If we don't receive a fiber proposal, or the fiber proposal is over that extremely high cost threshold that we would then establish, meaning if it exceeds, using the example yesterday, like $8,900 per location in requested funds, that's when we would look at the non-fiber proposals submitted in that zip code in that first round. This could be fixed wireless, this could be low Earth orbit satellite, it could be other kinds of satellite technology. That's when we'll consider those proposals in round one. Round two has a similar structure, looking at fiber proposals under the extremely high cost threshold. There's also the opportunity to request a waiver to that high cost threshold in that second 30-day round for the location by location bids. But for primary application process purposes, that's the outline of how we're going to consider fiber and non-fiber proposals in that first 90-day round. Questions there before I turn it over to the team at RSM to take us into the next section? Questions online from anybody? Okay, well, with that, I'll turn it over to the RSM team to go through the next round of BEAD requirements to complete for the narrative application. Yeah, come on.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? Wonderful. All right, so we will go ahead and we'll walk through. I'll do the first 4 sets of application requirement sections for today. And then we'll have Vince join us and he will help out for the last 4. So for the first section, this is a little bit of a vague section, but we've helped to define some of the things that you can include in your application to demonstrate your commitment to and compliance with applicable laws. So you'll see here that there's one narrative for this section, and it really is just you committing to carrying out your funded activities in a competent manner and in compliance with any of the applicable laws, then certifying that. So the narrative really is just for the Office of Broadband to place on record. It's not anything too extensive, and this is a relatively light section and shouldn't be very time consuming for you all. Yeah, if you are online, would you mind muting? Thank you. So here we just have a slight breakdown about this compliance narrative and a few of the details that you could include in there and the details that we'll be reviewing for. We're looking for past records with projects of similar scope or size, how you've been compliant there. If you have any specific trainings or specific strategies to maintain compliance throughout your organization, this is your opportunity to tell us about those and just ensure that, hey, you're letting us know that you are committed to and will carry out those activities in a competent manner. On the right-hand side, you'll see a few of example laws that you can consider touching on. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list whatsoever, but you're able to say, hey, we understand the requirements of these laws. We understand how they apply to the BEAD program. Here's how we plan on carrying out these activities in a compliant manner. Any questions on that general section about just overall compliance in the program? All right, wonderful. So now we can move on to operational capability. And operational capability is a little bit in the same vein as what we touched on yesterday with managerial, technical, and so forth. This is where we're evaluating your organization's ability to perform certain activities. So I know this is a little bit of an exhaustive list, and this is all the information pulled directly from the BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity. Essentially, here you've got two sections. You've got a list of if-then statements. So if any of these apply to your entity or your applicant, then you're going to have to either submit documentation up top or submit a narrative on the bottom. And it's important to note that it's pretty likely that more than one of these will apply to you. So just be sure to read through all of them and know that it's not just one off and then you're done. And on the next slide, we go ahead and just break these down into a little bit more of a digestible way. So you'll see at the top a few of the if-then statements. So if you have operated only an electric transmission or distribution service, here's what you need to submit for that, examples of what you could submit to be compliant with that section, and so forth. A key one here to touch on is if you are a new entrant into the broadband market, you're going to want to demonstrate your operational capability, but it's going to be difficult to do that based on prior experience because you may not have one in this space. So here's an opportunity for you to submit resumes for your key personnel, any applicable projects, and then references will go a long way in this section. Then you've got two additional ones, excuse me, on the far side, a couple more if-then statements where we've laid out, hey, if this applies to you, here's where you need to submit. We do have hyperlinks in this document, which will obviously be available for your use after this session, where you can click directly into the forms that you need to submit or have submitted and ensure that you have covered all of those. So there's one other key element here, and it's a little bit of your discussion on how you're going to engage with the public and make sure that you have a well-developed communication plan to make sure that all of your stakeholders are aligned and informed throughout the process. So you've got two different descriptions of what those should look like and a few of the details that you can include. So are there any digital literacy efforts being used? Are you publicly communicating the progress or just the overall project development timeline to any forums? How that information will be displayed if you're showing timelines, if you're showing Gantt charts, et cetera. And then any cadence of updates that you'd be providing to the public is always good to let us know your plans to do. Then on the far hand side, you've got kind of a similar vein of ideas about how, hey, how are we going to make sure that everyone involved in this stays up to date? And there's not just, hey, we started, hey, we finished. We want the public to be aware of this throughout the entire process. Any questions on operational capability, if-then statements, or the narratives? All right, seeing none, we can go ahead and move on. So this section touches on your providing an ownership summary, basically an explanation of how your entity is owned and if there are any subsidiaries, parent relationships, et cetera. Those are important to disclose here. So this is based on 47 CFR in a specific section. We've got those laid out and hyperlinked here so you can view them. And then I believe that on the next slide, we have those detailed. So we've got basically different types of entity structure here. So if you fall into these categories, on the right-hand side, that's the information that you would need to provide or touch on. This will just be developing a narrative, and you can do it in list format, just saying, hey, we are disclosing that this is the structure of our entity. Here's the information, name, address, citizenship, et cetera. Then on the second slide, we've got some more general ones that may apply to all of you, where, kind of same thing. You're going through this list, you're checking, hey, is this applicable to us? And if it is, you just need to provide short descriptions of, for example, principal business, applicable relationship, and entity status. Any questions on the section on providing ownership? Oh, sorry. Can we get a... 1 second, we're bringing a mic over to someone in the audience.
So again, this is Robert Bridgman from Eastern Broadband. For the ownership, I didn't see anything about municipal locality entity. I think we're probably the only one in the room that's going to apply as an entity that isn't a for-profit entity of some sorts. Is there an option for us in that list?
I can take that back and look further into it. Based on the list, I don't think that there's anything extra that you would need to provide. I think you can just detail, a little bit of information about your entity in the application. And obviously, we will review this to see if any of these apply. But if they don't, you're more than welcome to just say, we've reviewed the requirements in this section, and we can disclose and confirm that none of them apply to our entity.
Okay.
All right, hearing no other questions, we can continue moving. So
So
we can touch on.
I do have a question. This is Tom with All Points Broadband. Could you hit on the bidding credit one more time, please?
Yes. So this is a link where we don't have the exact information in here right now, but we can take this back and we can take it down into the FAQ and provide a little bit more of the information on what exactly that information would be to satisfy that section. It's just tough to list all of this out that's in the federal code. Good. All right. And keep moving. Sorry that we don't have a perfectly direct answer to that right now, but we will be sure to touch on it. Gotcha. Okay. So comment from the audience there was that is a small business or minority designation. So this will be my last section, then we'll pass it over to Vince. So one of the key components of the application is disclosing if you are involved or have received funds from any publicly funded programs here. So we've got the list that's highlighted in the BEAD notice of funding opportunity on the screen now. So you'll need to go back and, if you need to check your records, that's fine. But a lot of times this information will be top of mind. And for each one of these that you have received funding through and have deployed a project through or plan to deploy a project through, you have to include the information that's in the bottom list here. So what we've done is we've provided a little bit of background just on the left-hand side, kind of reiterating the points from the previous slide. And we've developed just an example response template where you could go ahead and just copy and paste this in and plug and play your information into this, and it would be considered a compliant response because it's touching on all of the sections that are required in the BEAD NOFO. So you're telling us a little bit about your applicant name, of course, speed and latency of your service, if there's any geographic area, details, number of unserved and underserved locations committed to be served or that have been served in that project, and just kind of an overall detailed explanation of that project, the status of it, and then the details included. And here, if you would prefer not to do that in a narrative format, you are welcome to do that in a table if you'd like. This is just a little bit of a table format where you could go ahead and it's got the same columns asking you for specific information at the top. And you do fill in different projects on the left-hand side in each one of the rows. We would then review that just the same as the narrative, but it's just totally up to you. We wanted to be able to provide different methods for you to submit here to your preference and make sure that it's as easy for you as possible. And here on this slide, we've highlighted a few of the resources you can use if that information isn't top of mind, if you do need to look further into the details about projects that you've received funding from. So we've got some hyperlinks here, we've got maps, and just general resources. This is an area too where you can always contact the Office of Broadband and we can help you out just looking into these projects, making sure that you are filling out all of the required fields for the projects that you're disclosing publicly funded from. All right. So I believe that wraps up that section. Any questions on disclosing information on publicly funded projects? All right, hearing none, I will pass the mic over to Vince Mason to round out the application sections. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Hayden. Labor and employment laws. Quick overview and then some examples on how you could choose to respond. Basically, applicants need to go ahead and provide a record of past compliance with state and federal labor and employment laws. And we show here what is expected in order to go ahead and demonstrate that and what should be included in your response. So that would cover prior performance. We'd also like to understand in your application what your plans are to ensure continued compliance. If you're awarded a BEAD project, BEAD funded project build, and what needs to be included to go ahead and communicate what those future plans are and how you'll carry them out. And then, of course, there's additional certifications that are required at the bottom here as well. Here we have examples of details on what you can include for past performance on the left, and on the right, examples of what you can go ahead and include to show your future plans on how you'll go ahead and complete the BEAD build outs following labor and employment law. Any questions on labor and employment law? Riveting, I know. All that stands between you and being able to head back home are the few remaining slides here. So we'll just go ahead and move through them if that's what you'd like. Advancing workforce development. Okay. We want to make sure that you're able to demonstrate the types of credentials and certifications and licenses and other evidence of the qualifications and experience of the people that you're going to use to build out networks, whether they have that today, as well as the opportunity they might have to develop it during the course of the build out. We'll need to see plans that you have as well to go ahead and provide those opportunities to your workforce as the projects are executed, and then again, certifying to all of that. Documentation examples are listed here on the left in terms of certifications, licenses, and other applicable credentials that we would view as being compliant. If there are additional that are not listed here, please go ahead and include them in your application. And then, as with the other areas we've discussed, your future compliance plans on how you're going to help to ensure that your workforce maintains their existing certifications that are relevant, or how additional certifications can go ahead and be maintained and earned. Moving on to skilled and credentialed workforce, there's a bit of redundancy in these sections. If it feels a bit redundant, when in doubt, just go ahead and copy paste and make sure you include it in subsequent sections. That way you'll reduce the risk of us having to contact you back to go ahead and put some additional information in to have a conforming application. Okay. And here we're looking for, in the application process, evaluating to make sure that, again, skilled workers will be sourced and utilized. Whether or not you're working with a unionized workforce, we do understand that the Commonwealth is a right to work state. And whether or not you're using your own employees or you'll be working with subcontractors. That needs to be included in your application as well. And then if you have a workforce that is not unionized, then we're looking for job titles, number of positions that you have in each title, and then the type of work that would be completed by each individual with that particular job title, the safety training, OSHA and other licensing requirements and so forth, and then certifying to all of that. Okay, so we have the key response areas here on the left in terms of what you want to make sure you include in your application. On the right, I do want to call out that for organizations that have a non-unionized workforce, again, there are details around job titles and the work that's carried out by each of those types of positions and compensation rates and so forth. Any questions on skilled workforce? Okay. MBE, WBE, and LSAs. All right. When utilizing subcontractors for the BEAD program, we want to make sure that applicants plan to take reasonable steps to go ahead and elicit participation from these different groups as you have demands for products and services in your project. So we want to make sure that small women and minority-owned businesses and women's business enterprises are solicited whenever possible as part of your procurement process. Also, it's desirable if you're able to break your project up in a manner that makes it easier for some of these organizations to participate than they would otherwise. We'd encourage you to go ahead and do that and demonstrate that in your application. You could do that in your narrative as well as when you go ahead and submit your project schedule. You could call that out. And again, you can also reach out to other organizations such as the Small Business Administration and the Minority Business Development Agency. And there are also some additional agencies here in the Commonwealth that can provide that kind of assistance to you as well. And again, you want to go ahead and certify that all necessary information that's required is submitted in your application so that we can pass that along to NTIA. On the left, we have the details to include in your plans, should you choose to subcontract. And on the right, we've got some resources identified here that are available to you in the Commonwealth to help you go ahead and define as well as execute those plans should you be awarded a BEAD project build. Any questions on MB? Yes, sir. Thank you, Chandler, for being a runner. We have a question here in the room.
Tell us who you are. Thank you very much. Ron Johnson from MMTC, a nonprofit. My question is, companies that are very innovative in identifying diverse workforces and the utilization of small businesses, is there a way for these companies to receive additional points in the evaluation process for their hard work in finding these companies and individuals?
Chandler, I'll pass that to you.
Thanks, Vince. In the BEAD scored material section, we have a section about fair labor practices. That's the only thing we have in relation to whether or not folks or how folks are abiding by fair labor laws, federal labor laws. At this time, no, we don't have any extra scoring criteria or bonus points to address what you just mentioned.
Do we have any questions online? Thank you very much. Hearing none, I'll pass it back to Chandler.
Great. Well, I'm going to take 2 minutes to get my computer up there with a couple of questions we want to crowd poll on, and then we'll wrap things up. There's a couple of things we want to tackle here in the last bit of the presentation. What I'm going to pull up here is first that same survey from the RSM folks to kind of collect your information and specific feedback about the content that was presented today. While you're filling out that survey, I'm going to pull up a couple of crowd polling questions to kind of help us figure out what we need to do next in terms of putting out information, hosting additional technical assistance sessions. So first, and I'm going to look to the RSM folks for approval here. This is the QR code on slide 44, not the original one. So I think this is the one that corresponds correctly with today's content. Excellent. I'm getting some thumbs up. So for the folks in the room and for the folks online, please scan that QR code and fill out that survey to give us feedback about today's specific information. While we're doing that, I'm going to pull up a couple of more crowd poll questions to let us know what's next. Going to be about 2 minutes of silence here. Okay, so as we're continuing to work on those survey responses, feel free to save the responses for later or revisit that after the drive home today. What I'm going to pull up now is a couple of crowd poll questions from another computer. So bear with me as I transition that over and exit out this QR code. This is to collect information about what we feel confident on under the BEAD program, what we're concerned about, and where you want to hear more from us on in particular topic areas. So I'm going to ask you to text in some responses to a particular QR code as I pull up that screen here. Okay, first question. This is first question out of 3. Then we're going to get you on the road, I promise. I'm going to ask you to probably will not be able to scan that QR code up in the top right-hand corner unless I make it larger. Perhaps you can then grab it at this point. If not, you can text in or join this by URL. And for the folks online, you're also welcome to do this. Let me see if I can make that QR code any larger to make it easier on the folks in the room. How's that? Folks online ought to be able to scan the same QR code. This is an active question now. It's asking, what do you feel most confident about under the BEAD program? Would encourage you just to text in a short 2 to 3 word response. This is a free program. We are not going to pay for the subscription, so the first 25 responses will be displayed on this, and you may see a comment that kicks back to you about being the 26th respondent or more. So I'm going to present that back on the screen now. Hopefully we scan the QR code. What do you feel confident about under the BEAD program? You guys had to have gotten something out of the last couple of days. Okay, the narrative sections. I'll ask for folks in the room that feel comfortable sharing, why confident in the narrative sections? Not saying you shouldn't be, but do you feel like you know all the responses, just a matter of putting the time in now to develop the narratives and make sure you hit the responses? I'm seeing some nodding heads. Anybody want to share anything in particular there? See, available resources, and I guess on the back end of this word cloud, it does split up your 2 to 3 word responses. So I kind of have to put together logically what I think folks are submitting here. Available information, resources that are available, 2-part application process. Okay, this is good. This is good. ZICTA, somebody feels confident in the zip code submission process. I see some nodding heads and I see some smirks in the room. We're going to give some time and a little bit more of a pause in the room if anybody cares to elaborate on a submitted response here. Okay, let's go to the next question. Next question is, where do you feel most concerned about the BEAD program? This is getting into the last 2 areas here where on one question, we're going to ask you, what do you feel most concerned about under BEAD? And on another question, we're going to ask you, where do you want more information about BEAD? So for the first question here, I'm going to make it live now. What do you feel most concerned about under the BEAD program? I'm hoping you can use the same text link to be able to submit a response here, but please let me know if you need to rescan here. Again, kind of logically putting together the 2 to 3 word responses that are getting split up here. Election results, application changes, deobligation, big topic of deobligation. Huge topic of deobligation. This is interesting. Mapping, served locations, bundles. This is interesting stuff. Appreciate you all submitting this because this is the basis of what we're going to look at when we start developing those technical assistance sessions. You can expect to hear from us about when we're going to schedule those. As we said in that policy notice, we'll give you a heads up about when we're going to schedule those technical assistance sections. I would imagine those are going to coincide with the weekly office hours, and we're just going to put technical assistance sessions within those weekly office hours just to keep folks' schedules aligned. But this is interesting stuff. Thank you for sharing that. I think we've gotten probably our 25 day, our 25 response limit here hit now. Okay, let's go to the last question here. What would you like more information on in the BEAD program? What are things that we as the Office of Broadband and our partners at RSM, what are some things that we could put out that would be helpful for you all in the application process? Only a couple of responses in so far. Okay, here we go. We got some more coming in now. Resilience of networks, workforce development, equity investments. There's bound to be more out there that are coming in. What are other things you'd like to see us put out information-wise about the BEAD program? Kind of addressing things that you texted in the last response about places or things that you don't feel comfortable about. Post-award assignment. Got it. That's one of the policy notices coming out. But how do we structure assigning locations out of zip codes post-award? And if that ability is going to be there and where it's going to be. thank you to the person who figured out they could hack the process and put hyphens in between their words so they don't get split up in the response word cloud. Interesting. I'm surprised that the word resilience is popping on this slide. If you texted that in, if you don't want to put a hand up now and kind of explain what you mean by resilience, I would ask that you send in that question to the broadband email inbox so we can get a better understanding of that. To be honest, I'm just a little caught off guard there, kind of wondering what folks mean by resilience. There are climate resiliency provisions under the BEAD program, but those are mostly for us as a state to report back to NTIA on about how we're going to evaluate applicants. So if you submitted that, well, let us know. Another one in here is the actual date of construction starting. It's a great concern to have. One thing that we have been trying to communicate is how do we manage expectations under the BEAD program when it comes to folks in the field that are going to be actually benefiting from broadband access through these networks. To kind of lay out the timeline going forward, and this is kind of good for in terms of closing comments. And Tamara, I'll ask you if you want to come up and say any words of wisdom as well. Looking forward, kind of the timeline and schedule from here on out, of course, we have the 90-day application process wrapping up on March 1st. We will then, after that, launch that 30-day application window, probably starting sometime in the month of April. We would have awards announced around the time of June, and then that final proposal submitted to NTIA by July 25th of 2025. That's the development timeline of getting to the point where we recommend awards to NTIA. And as the person that submitted that response knows, the actual date of construction is not going to be the time that we submit the recommended awards to NTIA. Based on the current process as it's laid out, when we submit that final proposal to NTIA, it starts a review process on their end. They're going to review the final proposal we submitted to make sure that we followed the process that we committed to in our Volume 2 and in subsequent guidance. Once that final proposal is approved by NTIA, which we hope is in late 2025, that's when we'll be able to start having pre-contract discussions with broadband providers to get going and with the pre-contract phase, communicate the requirements, communicate things like the environmental review, any remaining BABA compliance measures that need to be taken account for. After that, once we get you under contract, we think that's going to be by early 2026 in terms of real construction start for the BEAD program. There is a allowed maximum time frame here that kind of puts us into 2026, and that is from the time we get approval of our final proposal by NTIA to when we execute the contract with the broadband providers. That can be no more than 6 months based on current federal rules here. So we have a 6-month window to execute the contract with you. That's going to govern us to a maximum allowed timeline. So pretty much put a 6-month shot clock starting on the date that we get our final proposal approved to when we absolutely must execute the contract with broadband providers by. We can do it sooner. And we can certainly start with pre-contract activities sooner. But be on the lookout for when we get that approval date of our final proposal, because that'll be a huge milestone and a shot clock that starts at that point. But short answer, we think construction will start in early 2026. There's a question in the room to that of whether or not that is a 4-year construction timeline. The maximum allowed timeline for construction of projects under BEAD is 4 years. If applicant commits to 1 year or 2 years or 3 years in their response in the zip code portal, we're going to write your contract for that time frame. Okay, well, call up Tamara to give us some words of wisdom and send us on the road.
I also saw a release sample contract. We're currently working on that. We do have to bring in outside counsel to help us because this will be the first time we're contracting directly with you all. So give us a little time. We will be sharing a sample contract template, which also has to be reviewed by NTIA. So just be patient. We're working on it. First of all, I want to thank you all for attending, whether you're online virtually or in person. In this really cold last 2 days in Richmond, it's been the coldest days I've experienced so far this year. Last week it was like 70 degrees here. So thank you for braving the cold. I know my friends from Southwest Virginia are used to this cold, which is why I have a 3/4 length fur hood coat just for going down there. I do want to share with you all, we appreciate you all working with us who have participated in the BODY program. We look forward to partnering with you on the BEAD program and closing the digital divide from an infrastructure standpoint. I will give a shameless plug for the Broadband Advisory Council meeting, which we've talked about yesterday a bit. If you can't attend in person, try to attend online. There'll be some great announcements around BEAD non-deployment as well, which I know several of you all are interested in as well. Couple of things to remember. We have one shot to get this done with BEAD. And so I encourage you all to reach out to us if you have questions. As Chandler has said, email us at thebroadband@dhcd.virginia.gov email. We will be doing open office hours, which will put that schedule out soon. I know you guys are all used to emailing me and wanting to talk to me about what your plans are for broadband deployment. Unfortunately, do not email and call me to talk to me about your plans for BEAD. Because of the requirements around BEAD from NTIA, we have to keep everything open and transparent. And so, yes, I will take calls and you all can talk to me about your plans, but we cannot get into the nitty gritty of the BEAD program as we had with VADI. We still have the VADI program. It has not gone away. But I do want to share that I know you guys love to text me and email me and call me to schedule calls, but please make sure you go through the proper channels with the BEAD application process, because whatever information I discuss with you all and individually, we have to make public to everyone. And so I do want to let you all know, yes, it's great. Talk to me after the workshop. If you see me, let me know you're planning on applying, but I cannot get into the details without making sure it's an open and transparent process. And some folks have already reached out, so that's why I wanted to share that message. And then the last thing I will share, please reach out to the team again through that email address. We, if anyone remembers, who's been around since when Evan was the chief broadband advisor? By show of hands. You remember Evan used to say we're building the plane as we're flying it. We used to say that a lot with VADI. Well, the plane is on the runway. For most of y'all, it's already flying in the air because you're working on VADI. And so at some point we'll have a clear landing with BEAD, and then we'll work on things around adoption, because we know we have a great take rate in Virginia. We've seen an average of 60% across VADI projects for the last 7 years. And so we want to make sure we sustain that, but also increase more folks utilizing the internet through adoption efforts. And so that's why I make the shameless plug for the BAC meeting on Friday. We're going to share great information. And so I want to thank you all online for joining us this morning and joining us yesterday afternoon. And for those of you in person, please have safe travels home and have a wonderful holiday season. Thank you.